Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Thrive55 Plus podcast, where we give practical inspiration so you get healthier. Your host, Cheryl Jones, will help you uncover more of who you already are and explore what you need to heal and flourish one moment at a time. Cheryl is an author, wellness leader, and health coach voted one of the most powerful women in the mindfulness movement by Mindful Magazine. There is no AI-generated content in this podcast. This has been created by subject matter expert Cheryl Jones.
Welcome to the Thrive55 Plus show. I'm your host, Cheryl Jones, and in this episode, I'm talking with Dr. Jane Fleishman about the role of sex and romance for healthy aging. A PhD-trained sexuality educator with a background in organizational change, Jane offers sex education training for elder care professionals and for individuals and couples. At the age of 62, Jane earned a PhD in human sexuality from the Widener University Center for Human Sexuality Studies. Jane, welcome and thanks so much for being here.
Oh, Cheryl, thank you for inviting me. I'm so psyched to talk with you.
I'm so thankful that we met back at the Mass Council of Aging conference last October. That was where I had the pleasure of participating in one of your workshops. And I was so curious about this, for my own self as I am wanting to age healthfully, and for the people who are interested in exploring all aspects of their wellness. And this seems to be such a relevant part of that for us. So I just want to start out with just helping us understand a little bit about what exactly is a sexuality educator.
Well, great question. I had no idea either when I was growing up. Who ever thought they'd grow up to become a sex educator? Those are the people in gym class who put those scary diagrams that look like a Georgia O'Keeffe cattle skull or something. And it was supposed to be fallopian tubes and uterus and ovaries. And I never thought that would be a path I would take. And you're absolutely right. I came to this work late in life. And as you said in your intro, I had a full career, a very successful career, Cheryl. I was a really dedicated member of the public sector. I was the director of medical education at a large psychiatric facility. I was an organizational consultant, and I did a lot of really great work with teams. And it was serious and good work. But at the age of 55, I was really happy to retire. And so when I retired, I wasn't really ready to do nothing. I was ready to, well, as I usually say, cause a little bit more trouble. So as the great John Lewis said, there's good trouble. And I wanted to get into a little bit more good trouble. And I thought, what better place to get into good trouble than to talk about one of those taboo topics like sex? So when you become a sex educator, it's very interesting, Cheryl. I got a master's in education with a specialty in human sexuality. And then I went on to get my PhD in human sexuality as an educator. Some of the people in our program chose to be sex therapists, but I thought, I don't have that much time left. I can't go 1-to-1 or 2-to-2. I got to get a group of people together so I can talk to more people because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this. I just turned 70 last month and I feel like I'm going strong, but I don't know. We'll see if I can remember where my notes are, remember wait, where am I supposed to be going today? So I thought I'm going to be an educator because I'd been an educator. I just changed the content, right? Same pedagogy, same kind of methodology, and I just changed the content. And so when I was in school, I started getting interested in the idea that maybe there's a group of people who've been really marginalized around sexuality. And it's not just people of color who have had many myths about their sexuality. It's not just disabled people. It's not just LGBTQ people who've been really stigmatized, but also another group that was really invisible was older folks like us. So I said, I'm going to focus on sexuality education for older adults. And it has been a total blast. People are dying to be seen and respected and thought of as sexual beings over 55. And yet our mainstream narrative about people over 55 is they're all washed up. They can't get it up. They're all dried up. They're just not interested. Or they're too hyper, right? It's this very kind of binary, you're either on or off. You're either sexual, you're not. You're younger, meaning you're beautiful and sexual. You're older, meaning you're not beautiful, you're not sexual. And I wanted to take apart that narrative. I wanted to flip it over, and I wanted to sort of begin a conversation. And boy, have I begun a conversation. Remember that workshop you were at? We were talking about loving our aging bodies. And people got into it. It was great. Because nobody sees us as sexual beings anymore. You know, the literature belies that myth. All of the evidence shows that, for instance, in John de la Matter's large meta-analysis that was published about 10 years ago, he found that older adults in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s are still having sexual experiences. And other researchers have found that people are not only having sex in their older years, but that sex is important to the quality of their life. It's important to their mental health. It's important to other areas of their life. And so I became a sex educator. Well, Cheryl, I guess I became a sex educator because I wanted to tackle another taboo. I'd been dealing with many other taboo topics in my life, but I thought this was kind of a really good one for me to have as my next career. You notice I didn't say my last career. I may have one more in me. I don't know yet.
I love it. You're such an inspiration, really showing the way, like role modeling. What does healthy aging look like for us? And being, that you started a whole new career, not completely new. You obviously were drawing from tons of experience, but that is a possibility for us. And, when you said that you retired, I like to say, we rewired. You're such a great example of rewiring, not retiring. And, showing people what it looks like. And I love being around people who are helping us to show what it can look like. And, what you're saying about us in this age of this chapter of our lives, we're understanding the role of our sexual wellness. As a mindfulness teacher, to me, that is at the heart of my model, because I believe it's this being awake and aware of what is possible in the moment, and addressing the whole person, body, mind, spirit, heart, and soul. And I just love to hear from your perspective, what is sexual wellness and why does this matter so much?
I'm so glad you framed it in terms of wellness, Cheryl, because from your background and from mine, very often when we look at wellness, we look at physical, we look at mental, we look at spiritual, sometimes we look at financial, but very rarely do we look at sexual wellness. And of course, sexual unwellness, that's not a word, but those of us who feel unwell in our bodies sexually far, I'm sure, outnumber those of us who don't. I don't know any data on that, but from my experience, I would say that many of us feel very ill at ease with our bodies sexually as we are in any stage of lives. So what wellness means to me, and this comes out of a wonderful article in The Lancet from 2021 by Kristen Mitchell and her colleagues. She looked at sexual wellness as a comprehensive set of intersecting circles. So the first one she looked at is sexual health. And we know what sexual health means. It means basically being free from sexually transmitted infections, what we used to call STDs. STIs is our term for it nowadays. We also know that sexual health means understanding one's body and arousal and desire, and when we feel good about having a sexual moment and when we don't, having the freedom to choose that. Sexual health is also about taking care of our sexual organs and making sure that we are free from any kind of disorders or pain or difficulties. And of course, as we age, sexual health can also mean dealing with erection issues or vaginal lining getting thinner or tearing, or not having as much personal lubrication. And each of these areas are easily remedied, but many people don't know the way to do that. And that's part of what I teach. So that's the first circle. The second one, Cheryl, that I think is so cool about this article is they talk about the circle of sexual pleasure. Okay, Cheryl, do you remember having sex ed in high school or middle school?
Okay, so Jane, I actually taught it, and I remember putting the condom on a baseball bat and showing all these disgusting pictures of all these STDs trying to scare ninth graders. So
right,
yes.
Okay, so you are the perfect example of what I'm talking about. We never talked about pleasure. And it was kind of a what would you call it? A contradiction. I was going to say a hypocrisy, but the whole thing is hypocritical, right? When we talk to kids about sex, we try to scare them out of not having sex because we know how good it feels. So this model posits sexual health first, then sexual pleasure. I love that. And I think it's a real revolutionary step to remind us that sexual pleasure is not just for the individual, but for the other person or persons that individual would want to have sexual experiences with. So what a beautiful thing. Free from coercion, free from sexual violence, free from non-consent. Really incredible, right? The third circle is really about something that kind of puts this model into a frame that I think is very globally reaching and also about social activism, which is an area that I come out of. And that is something that she calls sexual justice. It's not an interesting term. So you could liken it to racial justice, environmental justice, reproductive justice, which is closely akin, right? But sexual justice puts our sexuality in a frame that says there are people who may take advantage of us. There are people who may thwart our pleasure in a way that could be very harmful to us. And we need to fight against that and advocate for the freedom for those of us to have our sexuality as a human fundamental right. And then the last circle is about sexual well-being, which only exists with the other three circles. So what I love about this is it's really integrated. It really brings the whole person in, and it really speaks both to the individual level, the event level, and kind of this global reaching level. For me, Cheryl, what I think is so interesting is, I go to assisted living communities a lot. I go to councils on aging a lot. I go to conferences and I speak. And everybody's got a wellness program. And I keep telling them, don't create a new sexual program or sexuality program. Just subsume sexual wellness within the umbrella of all the other wellness activities that you're doing. And that goes for another area that I'm very interested in. I did my research on older adults in same-sex relationships. And a lot of senior centers are struggling with how do we invite in and make more inclusive our doors for LGBTQ seniors. And what I say to them is, don't create a separate parallel track. Invite people in and make sure that it's inviting and inclusive enough so that individuals who often would otherwise feel marginalized can be part of your wellness programs.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. The inclusiveness and the integration of and making it possible for all of us to learn from each other and just welcome. That's what inclusivity really is. And I so appreciate this holistic understanding. The way that you're sharing this is just feels so liberating and enlightening. And as we continue to move in this direction as individuals and expanding our understanding as a society, there's a journey ahead of us. And I just am curious, as we're on this pathway, what are some of the common challenges that you're seeing with sex and aging?
I get lots of really great questions from people. People are not shy. In fact, as soon as I start speaking in a way that is respectful, that's compassionate, that's passionate, right? I'm passionate about this. I'm on a mission. When people get it, also that I speak from evidence-based rather than just kind of here's what I'm thinking idea, people trust me enough with their concerns. People ask me questions like this. I've been reading in the news that the STI rates for older adults are skyrocketing. Does that mean everybody's having sex? What about me? How come they're all having sex, and how much sex are they having? And of course, those media reports about skyrocketing STI rates, they're not untrue, but they're located in a very specific kind of environment. And we have to remember that most adults, maybe even some of your students, didn't get really what we think of as comprehensive sex education. And they didn't know as much as we hope that they would know now. So a lot of what I do is kind of, reinforcing areas that I wish that people had been taught earlier. Another question I get is sex good for my health? Well, guess what, Cheryl? It is good for your health. In fact, one of the big concerns that people have, my age and older, is around issues of dementia. How will I function if my brain is not functioning in the way that I'm used to? And that question pushes administrative and clinical leaders of senior living communities often into a really hard place because they fear that one of their patients or one of their residents might be taken advantage of because of their dementia, and that someone else might want to have sex with them in a way that may not be consensual. That whole area is understudied and really underassessed. And one of my colleagues, Nali Huitema, is creating, along with a number of other folks, an assessment tool to really develop an awareness among staff of whether or not someone has the ability, or what she calls the potential, to be a sexual being, even while they have dementia. Because as we know, dementia is not a static, there's ups and downs. Shen and Liu just published a really interesting article in the Journal of Sex Research, and I can get this to you if you're interested, on the correlation between sexual activities and cognitive function. The good news, Cheryl, is there is a correlation. So I want to tell all of your listeners, I want to tell all of my students that sex is good for the brain too. Beverly Whipple and her colleagues a number of years ago did a large study to show all of the benefits of sexual behavior and sexual activity in any age in life.
I love it that sex is good for health. That's a good message for us. And, I feel like some of us are, including myself, like when I think of, my family upbringing or my religious upbringing and social conditioning and all those things that form how I view sex, and just like trying to grow in all areas of my life to just be more comfortable. Even talking with you today, like I was a little bit nervous. It's like, okay, Cheryl, you can do this, right? Like we have to overcome our discomfort based on however we were raised or socially conditioned. And I feel like, we often feel like self-conscious or ashamed or embarrassed. So how do we kind of grow ourselves this way?
Yeah.
How do we get over ourselves?
So first of all, Cheryl, you're doing great. So not to worry. But here's the thing. Nobody in America likes to talk about sex, except when we're selling a product using sex to sell it. So look at any billboard, look at any store in the mall, you know that they're using sex as a way to promote the sale of something. But other than that, we're terrible at talking about sex at any age. Then if you lay on top of that, wait, I shouldn't say lay on top. Sorry, there's a lot of puns in my field. If you place on top of that this idea of ageism, right? So nobody likes to talk about sex. And then ageism means that we can't imagine older adults being as hardy and hale as younger people, right? Well, one of my colleagues, Ateret Gewurtz-Medan, who actually is in Israel, and she's an amazing sex researcher, she's coined this phrase that I love. It's sexual ageism. So not only are we having a hard time dealing with sexuality but we're having a hard time dealing with sexuality of older people. We cannot imagine older people being sexual. And so I think the way that we turn that around is we do exactly what you're doing on your podcast. We begin to expand the notion of who we are on every level and in every aspect of our lives. And we try to integrate what we know from our past and bring it into our future. Right now, I'm on this little, I don't know if it's going to work. I'll try it with you. Anytime I say, I'm feeling old or I'm feeling older, I ask people to add and beautiful. Now, I'm not trying to promote that appearance is the only thing that is important, but because appearance has been used against us as older people, that, young equals beauty, old equals all those epithets that I don't even like to repeat. I think if I could say I'm feeling old and beautiful, it might just turn somebody's head and say, wait, what did she just say? What is she talking about? That kind of thing. So we'll see. I'm trying it here first. And what do you think? Do you think that could be helpful?
I do. I love that and I think of beauty as, more holistic, that it could be maybe the way you're looking this day, if you're the way that you're feeling like beautiful physically, but it could also be, wow, I just got off a great conversation with one of my kids and I feel beautiful on the inside because I must have done something right as a mom, or maybe I feel beautiful because I a random act of kindness and got some spiritual points or whatever. Like, there's all ways that we can interpret beauty. And if we leave it open, I just think that's really powerful, really powerful.
Yeah, cool. I don't know if we did this in that workshop, but I have this question that comes up to me all the time. I'm 80 years old. I just met somebody new. I really want to have sex with them, but I don't want them to see my body. Now, that's complicated, right? So you don't have to see somebody's full body, by the way, to have sex with them, just so everybody is clear out there in listening land. But sometimes people are afraid to get undressed in front of somebody else. And so what I say to people is, take your clothes off, put on something you feel really sexy in, and get under the covers first. Then let them join you. And when they're about a quarter of an inch away from your eyes, they're not going to see the wrinkles, the sags, the bags, the bruises, the discolorations, the hair in the wrong places. They're going to be looking into the beauty of your soul. And it's exactly what you just said. They're going to see the beauty within. And who knows, that might be just the way that you see beauty for the first time, and that they see the beauty in you, or that you see the beauty inside yourself for the first time.
That's just so powerful. Again, like really understanding what is sex, right? We're asking ourselves, like, what does sex mean? What does sex mean to me? And just curious about your thoughts on that, like how, like, that's such a powerful example of how do we feel sexy? How do we not judge ourselves as much? Like, what does sex mean to me now in this chapter?
When researchers ask older adults what is sex, they get a wide range of answers. And when I talk with older adults about what is sex, I say, first of all, get out of this idea that sex between someone with a penis and someone with a vulva is all about penetration. Get out of that idea. It doesn't have to just be that. Because for many people with a penis as they age, it's not going to get as hard as it used to, or it won't last as long, or won't go in the same direction. I also say to people, when they ask me what is sex, I say sex may not include an orgasm. Just get off that track. So if I get them to expand their notion of sex beyond penetration, beyond orgasm, I introduce a word called outer course. Now, it's not a real word. It's a word that was coined by somebody in the late 90s. You won't find it in the dictionary yet. Maybe soon. Maybe we'll get there soon. But if you use your imagination, Cheryl, outer course is any kind of sexual enjoyment, any kind of sexual pleasure that can be had without penetration. And there's all sorts of ways. Now, Cheryl, here's your chance to just think and not have to speak and see. Then you can just smile, and nobody knows if you're embarrassed on the inside or not. This is the great way that, we can think about sex. And so my feeling is sex for older adults is really akin to a new kind of exploration, a new kind of discovery. You've got to have a sense of humor. It may include foot rubs and hand holding and great deep kisses. And that might be what it is for you. And it might be something with, who knows, handcuffs and a blindfold and something fun and kind of kinky. Who knows? But I would say sex for older adults is what I call multidimensional. It can be anything from what Betty Dodson used to call solo sex or masturbation. And you still got your own body, even if you don't have a lover or a partner who's willing, to sex with another person, or maybe you have the opportunity to have sex with more than one person. Many people as they age don't want to get married if they've been married in the past. They don't want to. Somebody said to me, I don't want a nurse or a purse. I think, one of the things that happens when you get older is you get a chance to try out new things, new discoveries. We often hear all the tragedies of menopause. Well, one of the great things about menopause is you don't have to worry about getting pregnant anymore if that was part of your sexual exploration. You don't have to worry about having any cramps anymore. You don't have to worry about mood swings. And for anyone who has thought, gee, I don't know if my body's going to be able to do it anymore, you'd be surprised what the body can remember. And you have to have a sense of humor, as I said before. You have to be willing to just laugh and roll with it when things don't go exactly right. It's okay. But you also have to be prepared and know where your body's at, what time of day. I always say to people, don't do the go out to dinner, romantic dinner, and want to come home and have sex, because you'll be exhausted. You'll fall asleep before you even get anywhere. So maybe schedule it in the morning or schedule it in the afternoon. You get what I'm saying.
Yes.
Really be prepared.
Afternoon delight.
There you go.
It's interesting. Again, the broadness and the friendliness that you're bringing to this conversation is really inspiring and refreshing. And, you said something about the range of from feet rubbing and massage to kinkiness. And so, what are sexual fantasies and how can they be useful for people?
Oh, yeah. Fantasy can be a really helpful part of sexual behavior as you get older, because sometimes fantasy and what you can conjure up in your mind can bring you to places that you may not be able to go anymore. I think we spoke about this before we went on the air, but I have a podcast as well, and we just did an episode about sexual fantasies. Now, I don't know when you're going to air yours, but if you could put a link to our podcast in the show notes, I'd be so happy. It's called Our Better Half. And the joke is that it's about sex in the second half of life, and we call it Our Better Half. And we just did a show with two sex therapists and myself talking about how they use this idea of sexual fantasy in their work with couples and with clients who are older. And for many people, they might think a fantasy, I have to act it out. No, it's a fantasy for that reason. It's inside here in your mind. And other people might say, but my fantasy is something I don't think I ever want to tell anybody about. I mean, it's kind of politically incorrect. And what they said is, you don't have to tell anybody what it is. In fact, a masturbatory fantasy, one that you use for yourself, no one has to know about. And you can choose, if you have a fantasy with a partner or partners, that you decide with them whether or not you want to disclose what those fantasies are. But fantasies can be a really wonderful and rich way of expanding sexual practices with each other. And that's the other part of it, Cheryl, that sexual practices need to change often because we've got a hip problem, or we had surgery, or we have a chronic illness. And so we've got to be thoughtful. When one person used to be able to lie on top of the other one, and now they just can't get all the way on top. We have to figure out ways to do that. And we work with a woman at one of the sex toy companies who is a disability rights person. And she's a fantastic advocate. And she's in a wheelchair. And she's the sexiest human being you have ever met. And she talks about different positions and different furniture and different toys that one can use to make their experience as pleasurable as possible, even when their body isn't able to move in the way that it used to.
Mm. Meeting ourselves where we are, and whether it's through imagination or tools or props, like whatever, giving ourselves what we need to improve this part of our lives, because, like, we have one body. It's the body we were born with. It's the body we're going to eventually not have or inhabit anymore. And so what a beautiful gift you're giving people by helping us to be more sexually accepting and free. And so, kind of as we're wrapping up here, Jane, I'm curious, can you share any guidance? Like, what could you offer to help people? You've already offered a lot already, but just like in closing, if they want to improve their sexual wellness, what would be a baby step they could take today?
I think the first is just to trust yourself, to know that you don't know where you're going right now, but to trust that you know your body better than anyone else does. One of my colleagues, Joan Price, who calls herself the senior sexpert. She's in her 80s now, and she is a hot ticket. And she's often said there is no expiration date on sex. There is no expiration date on sex means it's up to you to decide. No one can decide for you. Now, on my website, I've got tons of free materials that I've written, blogs, and I have my TED Talk. I have lots of really great stuff on there. I have courses. And so it's all free. If people are interested, just go on my website. It's just my name.com, and it's janefleishman.com. And it's very easy to download that stuff. And so there's such a wide variety of areas that people are interested in, Cheryl, that, I think people could find a lot of information there. And then there's a ton of sex on the internet, and most of the sexuality information is horrible. So don't go to the internet to learn about sex. There's like 8 or 10 websites that I recommend to people who are older to learn about sexuality. And then there's about 80 million that are really not going to give you much information. So write to me, and I'd be happy. If your listeners wrote to me, I'd be happy to send them information or a website that would be useful for them.
Beautiful. Well, we will have all of that information in the podcast notes, but if you could just tell everyone what exactly is your website to make it easy for us.
Sure. www.janefleishman.com.
Thank you so much, Jane. This is really helpful. I think you've really opened our eyes to, and our minds and our hearts, to help us to feel more comfortable and actually empowered to address this important part of our wellness. Dr. Jane Fleishman, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. What a cool conversation to have with you today.
In closing, I want to thank you once again for allowing me to be part of your journey. I hope you'll give these practices a try and see what you discover. If you have a comment or a question about today's episode, just write to me at Cheryl@thrivingwithcheryljones.com. Join me next time when we'll explore what mindfulness really is, its benefits, and how to develop a simple practice. Thanks so much for listening. Be well and thrive on.
Thank you for tuning in to the Thrive 55 Plus podcast. Contact Cheryl with a burning question, access free mindfulness meditation resources, and schedule a free consultation to explore how you can achieve your goals and aspirations through personalized coaching sessions with Cheryl. Just visit her website, thrivingwithcheryljones.com. Subscribe to or follow the Thrive 55 Plus podcast, leave a review, or share it with a friend. Until next time, be well and thrive on.